Right, welcome if you've subscribed to the factory. I'm delighted that people are starting to subscribe. I mean, because it's early days, but I thought what I'd do, I will talk about what the factory is all about and why I bought all this lot. My father liked arcade machines, and I like them too. I like the mechanical ingenuity of them, certainly. But this whole project came about, actually, curiously, through a dream a couple of weeks ago. And it woke me up. It was about 4 in the morning, and I thought, that's such a good idea. Keep it in your head, keep it in your head. Go and get a pen and paper and write this down. And luckily, it all stuck. But basically, what the project is, it will be a wall-mounted, coin-operated, well, you lightly call it amusement, but it'll all be a 1/12 scale. So any figures that feature in it will be about 6 inches tall. Calculated all this up, so it could be quite tall. You know, perhaps looking at 5, maybe 6 foot tall, about 4, possibly 5 inches deep, and I would estimate about 2 foot wide, so a sort of narrow thing. And what it'll be a factory of 5 or 6 floors, and each floor produces something completely different from the floor below or above. And that's the kind of quirkiness of it, because generally factories, they all produce the same thing, various sizes, different shape, but they concentrate on the same thing, but not this one, and that's what makes it so interesting. So I decided that one of the levels in the factory would just produce cakes. And the good thing is, when you're working in sort of doll's house stuff, you can get cakes in that scale. So each floor would have a conveyor belt with whatever they're producing going along the conveyor belt. Some of the characters that sit behind the belt, the actual workers, will do various things. We'll come to that in time, because I'm going to have to use some of the principles of automata to actually make these characters move. So one of them is going to be cakes, and another one is going to be eggs. And so there'll be crates and crates of eggs everywhere, eggs going down the conveyor belt. But over on the right hand side on the floor, there's just a chicken coop with just 3 chickens in it producing all these eggs. And one of the ideas I had was, because much of it's going to be electronic, I don't think I'll have to use an Arduino. I think I can keep it a little bit simpler than that, because my thinking is that the factory will start up on its own. It'll be coin operated, but there'll be various switches on the front, so you can interact with it and actually make things happen in the factory. And I thought, actually, with the egg one, what we could have is, for the most part, the chickens just sit there very still, but when you flick the switch, you hear a voice that says, "More eggs!" And then the chickens launch into, if you've heard it, the chicken Mission Impossible theme music, which just amuses me every time I hear it. And I thought, yeah, because that's a joke that you can repeat. So when it says "more eggs," the light comes on above the chicken coop. The chickens start moving around frantically, and then there's a sort of, you know, those tombola things, you know, they're for raffles with clear sides. Will start revolving. The eggs will be coming out from underneath the kitchen, underneath the chickens, and with a man at the side of it turning a handle. So yeah, there's quite a lot with it. And unfortunately, I don't have working cartridges for my printer. I had to pick up a printer today. But you know, these are some of the ideas. They are red, I know, but they'll be full colour when I come to do them. But there's some. Beware of the chickens. Yeah, just to give me some ideas and the sort of general, you know, factory type signs, that sort of stuff. And I did think, yeah, between the 6 floors there will be, and in my next video I'll show you a drawing of the whole thing, but to one side of the factory will be a flight of stairs that links all the different floors, go right up to the very top one where the manager sits in his office. And I'll just keep adding things to it, and as I say, it'll be called the factory. Anyway, we'll just talk about some of the things that I've already bought. cakes I've mentioned, and I keep this 2p here so you've got an idea of scale and what we're working with here. So that's the cake, so put them aside. This is absolutely brilliant, and it was under £3. Amazing thing. I'll tell you what it does. You've got a USB socket there in which you can plug it. This handles sound, by the way. You put a USB stick in that with a sample. It could be anything 10 seconds to a minute, whatever you like, and this thing will play it and repeat it ad infinitum. It's also got a slot for an SD card, which is probably what I'll go to because it takes up less space. And on this side of the board you've got a stereo out, that's that round one, and you've got a plain speaker there which would be mono, I imagine, but I'm going to go for stereo. And I have actually got a factory sound. In fact, you will have heard it at the beginning of this video. And so anyway, I have tried this, and all I did was put a USB stick in there with the sounds of the factory. I connected a headphone jack in there initially because I haven't got some speakers that I can connect to it for now. And I literally just plugged in a micro SD and this thing started playing and just kept looping it. And it made me laugh. I thought, for the cost, you know, imagine trying to solder this thing up and make one. I mean, you just wouldn't bother, would you? That's the way electronics has gone. Everything's very modular, you see. So that would be the sound. And because the cost is relatively low, I can run 2 or 3 of these. So this will produce the sound of the factory, and that will be fairly constant. But where I need extra sounds through the interactive switches and various things happening in the factory, and I can have a module for each of them. I'm not sure, I haven't really thought this one out in terms of how all these sound modules feed into one output, but I presume it's possible. Yeah, I don't see why not. So anyway, that was the sound module. Yeah, I was very pleased with that. So I may get a few more. We will see. The other thing I got was a bank of micro switches. They are quite tiny. So various things on the conveyor belt, as the conveyor belt goes past, could trigger one of these micro switches and trigger something else, another motor somewhere else. Who knows? Anyway, I got those. That was one thing. So I also got a bag of small springs, which I don't have in front of me. But this is the best thing of all. Look at the size of this motor on a 2p coin. I mean, that's tiny, isn't it? Yeah, they run on 5 volt, and these particular ones do just over 40 revs per minute, something like that, about 40 revs per minute. So they're relatively slow, you know, because they've got a gearbox on them. In fact, what I'll do, in fact, let's just concentrate on the motors. There you go. It's got a D-shaped shaft on it. That's running flat out, and I can actually, well, we're running at 5 volts and 200 milliamp. So if I just drop it down, say 4 is still going. No, I can't. Well, I probably could stop it with my hand, but you know, if I squeeze it between my fingers, that'll still continue to turn. It'd be tempting actually to connect these up with pulse width modulation, which would give me a bit more control over the speed, but I don't know. I think that's running about 1 volt. So if I nudge that up a bit, go to 5 volt, that's running at 5 volt. You see, what these are going to do, these are going to power the rollers at the end of the conveyor, and I would say, looking at the speed of that, if you imagine it's got a collet on it, so you can actually screw onto that shaft to get a connection, and it's connected to a roller on the end of a conveyor, that's going to be just the right speed at 5 volt. You know, for the small adjustment that you could get, I don't think it would really be worth it. That will just run fine. Amazing little things, aren't they? I mean, I remember DC motors, the only sort of small DC motors I ever came across were the sort of things you'd find in cassette recorders. But I mean, those had absolutely no power whatsoever, really. I mean, you could stop one of those quite easily and they'd burn out quite easily. But I mean, I mean, I'm pretty close to the camera, but it's very quiet, isn't it? Yeah, so I think that was a good choice in terms of actuating thing. You know, obviously with automata, people, they're hand cranked, and that's much of the charm because, you know, the object moves and it's through your input, you bring the whole thing alive. But I think to have it motor powered, I think is going to be the way to go. I have on my Facebook page put a few ideas out and got a good response on it, so I'm obviously heading in the right direction. But yeah, these motors, I've got to say, they are really, really good. I'm quite surprised it's such small engineering, but this tiny little gearbox, you know, to get the ratio right. Yeah, so that's the motors. So there we have it. That's my introduction to the factory, and it won't really become clear until you see the drawings, which will be in video too, and then you'll get a better idea. And I do welcome suggestions on and ideas. I mean, I've got lots myself, but people hear this and they say, "Oh, you could do this. Oh, you could do that," including. One of the ones I had very early on was to have a basement with a janitor in it, and fully kitted out with a boiler and everything else, and there's a downstairs toilet with the door slightly open and a light on, and him sat on it with his trousers round his ankles reading a newspaper. That one I thought was quite funny. So yeah, that's it really for video one, and stay tuned, because as we get on to the construction, it'll get more interesting. I actually bought a scroll saw today because although I do have, you know, I've got circular saws and I've got jigsaws, I'm okay on the big stuff. I didn't have anything for anything intricate, and you really need a scroll saw for that when you're making very tiny wooden parts. So I got one of those today, and I mentioned to my lad, he's 16, he's on an engineering course, and I said, "Have you actually used a scroll saw?" And he said, "What's one of those?" And I described it. He said, "Oh yeah, I've used one of those." I said, "Well, I was thinking of buying one." He said, "Oh good, can I have a go?" And yes, of course he can. So I've suggested that he join me. So hopefully my son will feature in the videos in the future. I do hope so, because he's got some good ideas from an engineering perspective, and you know, pulleys and cams, and you know, there's a lot we can do between us. So that's it. Thank you for watching this first one. You know, if you haven't subscribed already, do subscribe, because this could get really interesting. And don't forget, like or dislike below. And this channel runs alongside my normal channel, which is Ralph's House. You'll find that on YouTube, and that's really about house restoration. But this is a separate project altogether and ongoing. That's it. Thanks for watching.